Close your eyes and picture a ninja. You see it, don't you? A silent figure on a moonlit rooftop, cloaked in pure black, a phantom, a whisper of death, moving with supernatural grace. This is the ninja of movies, of games, of our collective imagination. This figure is a master of forgotten, mystical arts. They can vanish in a puff of smoke, run across water, and kill a samurai with a single, perfectly aimed throwing star. They are the ultimate lone warrior, a ghost in the machinery of feudal Japan. They are an icon of cool, a symbol of silent, deadly efficiency. The black pajamas, the hidden face, the curved sword on their back, every detail is etched into our pop culture. It's a powerful, romantic, and incredibly compelling image. But it is almost entirely wrong. The story of the real ninja is not one of magical assassins in black uniforms. It's a far grittier, more desperate, and frankly, more interesting story. It's a story of spies, saboteurs, and survivors who use their wits, not magic, to navigate a brutal world. Tonight, we're going to peel back the mask of the mythical ninja. We will set aside the comic book version and uncover the truth about who these people were, what they actually did, and why their legend became so much larger than their reality. Prepare to forget everything you think you know. The real story is one of farmers and freelancers, of clever tricks and dirty fighting. It's about surviving, not about looking cool while doing it. The true ninja was an expert in the art of not being noticed at all. So let's begin with the most famous element of the ninja myth, the uniform. That iconic, head-to-toe black suit, the shinobi shozoku. It's the first thing we picture, the very definition of a ninja's look. But a real ninja would likely never wear one. Think about it practically. Pure black is actually not a great color for stealth at night. It creates a stark, recognizable human-shaped silhouette against the natural lighter darkness of the night sky, which is rarely pitch black. It stands out more than it blends in. The true color of the night is a deep, dark navy blue, or a murky brown, or a dusty gray. These were the colors real shinobi would have worn. Dyes made from readily available plants, like indigo, would create garments that truly melted into the evening shadows. The black pajama outfit is a modern invention, and its origins are not in secret dojos, but on the stage. In Japanese kabuki and bunraku puppet theater, stagehands would dress entirely in black to signify to the audience that they were invisible, not part of the play. When these plays began to feature stories of ninja, the playwrights took a creative shortcut. How do you show a stealthy character on stage? You dress them like the invisible stagehands. The audience immediately understood the visual language. This person is not meant to be seen. So the iconic black suit wasn't a tool of historical espionage, but a piece of theatrical costume design. It was a clever stage convention that, over centuries, was mistaken for historical fact. The myth was born under the stage lights, not the moonlight. But the most effective outfit for a ninja wasn't a stealth suit at all. It was a disguise. A true master of ninjutsu would have understood that the best way to be invisible is to hide in plain sight. Blending in was the ultimate skill. A ninja on a mission was far more likely to be dressed as a humble peasant, a traveling merchant, a wandering monk, or even a performer. These disguises allowed them to move through enemy territory without raising any suspicion, gathering information from the most unlikely places. A guard on a castle wall might ignore a farmer walking along a road, but a man in a dark mask and suit would trigger an alarm instantly. Infiltration was about social camouflage, not just physical stealth. It was about becoming part of the background noise of everyday life. The tools they carried would match their disguise. A monk might carry a sharp blade concealed within a walking staff. A farmer could carry a kama, a sickle, which was both a legitimate farming tool and a deadly weapon in trained hands. This reliance on disguise reveals the true nature of their work. They weren't frontline commandos seeking glorious battle. They were intelligence operatives, And their most valuable asset was their ability to be utterly, completely, and boringly unremarkable. That was the real art. The myth tells us they were a class of their own, a secret clan of shadow warriors. The reality is that ninja wasn't a job title in the way samurai was. It was a description of a skill set, a set of tactics often employed by desperate people. Many so-called ninja were from the lower classes of Japanese society. They were farmers, villagers, and low-ranking samurai known as ashigaru. They came from provinces like Iga and Koga, regions whose difficult mountainous terrain made them hard to conquer and easy to defend. These people developed unconventional warfare tactics out of necessity. They couldn't fight the massive, heavily armed samurai armies on their own terms. So they fought differently, they fought smarter, they fought dirtier. And for that, they were both feared and looked down upon. Let's talk about the job description. The pop culture ninja is, first and foremost, an assassin. Their entire purpose is to sneak into a fortress, eliminate a high-value target with balletic grace, and vanish into the night. While assassination was certainly a service they could provide, it was one of the rarest and riskiest parts of their toolkit. A daimyo, a powerful feudal lord, was incredibly well protected. Getting close to one was a monumental task, and a direct attack was often a suicide mission. The true value of a ninja was not in taking a life, but in gathering the information that could win a war without a single, dramatic confrontation. They were history's greatest spies, and their primary weapon was knowledge. A ninja was far more likely to be hired to map out the defenses of a castle, identifying weak points in the walls, the number of guards, and their patrol schedules. This information was priceless to a general planning a siege. The real work of the ninja was often brutally unglamorous and required immense patience. It was the art of espionage in its most fundamental form. They were masters of eavesdropping, of planting rumors to create political instability, and of what we would now call psychological warfare. Imagine a ninja, disguised as a servant, spending weeks working in an enemy lord's kitchen. They aren't there to poison the food, not yet. They are there to listen. They listen to the gossip between cooks, the complaints of the guards, the loose talk of visiting officials. They learn about supply shortages, troop morale, and secret alliances. This slow, careful gathering of intelligence was far more destructive to an enemy than a single assassination could ever be. It was about dismantling an enemy's power structure from the inside out, piece by mundane piece, until it was ready to collapse under the slightest pressure. Sabotage was another cornerstone of the ninja's trade, but again, it was rarely as dramatic as we imagine. The goal wasn't a massive, fiery explosion for a movie poster. It was strategic, crippling, and designed to sow chaos and erode an enemy's ability to fight. A team of ninja might be tasked with sneaking into an enemy encampment, not to kill soldiers, but to set fire to their food supply. Burning down a granary before a long winter or a siege could be a death sentence for an entire army, achieved without a single sword being drawn in open combat. They might contaminate a well, not necessarily with deadly poison, but with something that would cause widespread sickness and weaken the troops. Their work was the definition of asymmetrical warfare, using minimal resources to inflict maximum, disproportionate damage on a larger, more powerful foe. Another key tactic was arson. In an era where cities and castles were built almost entirely of wood and paper, fire was a devastating weapon. A few well-placed embers on a windy night could reduce a fortress to ash. Ninja were experts in creating incendiary devices, using combinations of oil, pitch, and gunpowder. They would infiltrate a castle town and set fires in multiple locations simultaneously. This served two purposes. It caused immense physical destruction, but more importantly, it created widespread panic and chaos. While the castle's defenders were busy fighting the flames and trying to control the terrified populace, the attacking army could use the distraction to launch a surprise assault on the weakened and disorganized defenses. The fire was not just a weapon of destruction. It was a tool for creating opportunity. Let's dive deeper into the world of ninja tools, because this is another area where myth has completely overshadowed reality. Our imagination is filled with iconic, almost magical weapons. The first that comes to mind is the shuriken, or the throwing star. In movies, a ninja can flick their wrist and take down a guard from 50 paces away with a single, perfectly aimed star. In truth, the shuriken was not a primary killing weapon. It was a distraction tool, a secondary weapon at best. These small pieces of metal were often crude, easily concealed, and used to create an opening. A ninja cornered by a samurai might throw a handful of shuriken not at the samurai's heart, but at his face, hands, or any exposed skin. The goal wasn't to kill him, but to make him flinch, to break his concentration for a split second, providing the ninja with the precious moment needed to escape or to close the distance with a more effective weapon. The real arsenal of the ninja was far more practical and, in many ways, far more clever. Many of their most effective tools were disguised as common, everyday items, particularly farming implements. This was a brilliant form of camouflage. A man walking down a road with a sword was a warrior, but a man carrying a sickle was just a farmer. The kama, a simple sickle used for reaping rice, could be turned into a vicious weapon in trained hands, perfect for hooking, slashing, and disarming an opponent. The kunai, often mistaken in pop culture for a type of throwing knife, was originally a multi-purpose gardening and masonry tool. It was a heavy, leaf-shaped piece of steel with a sharpened point, more like a trowel or a pry bar. It was excellent for digging, prying open doors, gouging holes in walls, and, if necessary, as a thrusting dagger in close quarters. Their most important tools were not for fighting, but for infiltration. Getting in and getting out were the most critical phases of any mission. For this, they developed a stunning array of specialized equipment. They used collapsible ladders, grappling hooks attached to long ropes, and various types of manual drills for boring through wooden walls and floors. One of the most famous tools were the climbing claws, known as shuko for the hands and ashiko for the feet. These were spiked metal plates strapped to the hands and feet, providing extra grip for scaling stone walls or trees. They were not for combat, despite what movies show. They were purely for mobility, turning a ninja into an expert climber able to traverse terrain that would be impassable to a heavily armored samurai. Now, let's address the so-called magic of the ninja. The legends are filled with tales of them disappearing in a puff of smoke, walking on water, or using secret hand gestures to hypnotize their enemies. As with everything else, the reality was a clever application of practical science and psychology. The famous disappearing act is a perfect example. A ninja wouldn't magically vanish. They would use a device called a metsubushi, which literally means eye smasher. This was a small box or eggshell filled with a blinding powder, a mixture of ash, sand, ground pepper, and sometimes even finely ground glass. When threatened, the ninja would throw this powder into the enemy's face, temporarily blinding and disorienting them. In that moment of confusion, the ninja would simply run away or hide, leaving the victim with the impression that they had vanished in the cloud of dust. The trick of walking on water also has a practical, if less exciting, explanation. Ninja were highly skilled in reconnaissance and would meticulously study the environment before any mission. They would use rafts, inflatable skins, or specially designed floating shoes called mizugumo, water spiders, to cross moats or rivers. More often, they would simply identify shallow points in a body of water beforehand. To an observer watching from a distance at night, a figure moving quickly across what appeared to be deep water would look like they were performing a supernatural feat. It was not magic. It was meticulous preparation and the exploitation of the environment, combined with the observer's own fearful imagination. The ninja's greatest trick was making their enemies believe they were more than human. And what about the most famous ninja of all, the legendary Hattori Hanzo? His name is synonymous with the ultimate ninja master. He appears in countless movies and video games as the archetypal super assassin, the leader of the Iga ninja clans. The truth, however, is a bit more complicated and reveals a lot about the social structure of the time. Hattori Hanzo was a real historical figure, and he was indeed a badass. But he wasn't a ninja. He was a high-ranking samurai, a respected general in the service of the great unifier of Japan, Tokugawa Ieyasu. His family was from Iga province, the same region famous for its ninja, but Hanzo was a member of the ruling samurai class. He was a commander, not a covert operative. Hattori Hanzo's legendary status as the greatest ninja comes from his role as a commander of ninja, not as one himself. Because of his roots in Iga province, he understood the unique skills and value of the Iga shinobi. He became their primary employer and leader, commanding a force of several hundred ninja who served Tokugawa Ieyasu. So when you hear tales of Hattori Hanzo's incredible feats of stealth and assassination, it's more accurate to imagine him as the brilliant general who planned the mission, who dispatched his highly trained operatives to carry it out. He was the boss, the spy master, the man giving the orders from the command tent. He was, in modern terms, less of a field agent and more like history's most effective and dangerous middle manager. His most famous historical accomplishment solidifies this role. In 1582, the powerful warlord Oda Nobunaga was betrayed and forced to commit suicide. His ally, Tokugawa Ieyasu, was caught deep in enemy territory, with only a small group of retainers. It was a perilous situation, and his death seemed certain. This is where Hattori Hanzo stepped in. Using his knowledge of the local terrain and his connections with the local ninja clans of Iga and Koga, he guided Ieyasu and his men on a treacherous, secret journey across enemy lines to safety. He didn't do it alone, cloaked in black. He did it by marshaling his network of spies and guides. He saved the future shogun of Japan not with a sword, but with logistics and intelligence. This distinction between the samurai commander and the ninja operative is crucial. The samurai class had a rigid code of honor, Bushido, which dictated how they should live, fight, and die. Their warfare was, at least in theory, about honor, duels, and open battle. The tactics of the ninja, deception, poison, sabotage, disguise, were seen as dishonorable, as the work of lower-class individuals. A high-ranking samurai like Hattori Hanzo would never personally engage in such activities, but he was pragmatic enough to understand their devastating effectiveness. He used the ninja as a weapon that other, more traditional samurai lords either couldn't or wouldn't. This made his forces under Tokugawa Ieyasu incredibly formidable. So the legend of Hattori Hanzo is a perfect microcosm of the entire ninja myth. We've taken a real, powerful historical figure, a samurai general, and conflated him with the men he commanded. We've merged the story of the manager with the story of his employees. It creates a more romantic, heroic narrative of a single super warrior, but it erases the more complex and fascinating reality of a symbiotic relationship between a ruling class and the shadowy specialists they employed to do their dirty work. The real Hattori Hanzo was a brilliant strategist who knew how to wield a weapon that others scorned, and in doing so, he helped change the course of Japanese history. Now, let's address a part of the ninja legend that is often either ignored or highly sensationalized: the female ninja, or the kunoichi. In modern fiction, the kunoichi is typically portrayed as a femme fatale, a seductive assassin who uses her beauty to get close to a target before killing him. While this makes for exciting drama, it misses the true and far more practical value of female operatives in feudal Japan. Just like their male counterparts, the primary role of the kunoichi was not assassination, but espionage, and in this role, they possessed advantages that men simply did not. They could infiltrate places where a male stranger would be instantly suspect. A kunoichi could gain employment as a servant, a lady-in-waiting, a dancer, or a courtesan, within an enemy lord's castle. In these roles, they were perfectly positioned to become invisible, to blend into the daily life of the household. They could overhear sensitive conversations, gain the trust of other servants, and access parts of the castle that were off-limits to soldiers. A pretty new dancer at a banquet would attract far less suspicion than a new guard in the barracks. This access was their greatest weapon. They could gather information about the Lord's plans, his moods, his secret meetings, and his weaknesses. They could act as a listening post deep inside the enemy's most secure sanctuary. One of the most famous figures associated with the kunoichi is Mochizuki Chiyome, a noblewoman from the 16th century. According to legend, she was the wife of a samurai warlord who died in battle. Afterwards, the powerful daimyo Takeda Shingen tasked her with creating a secret network of female spies. Chiyome reportedly recruited women from all walks of life, orphans, disgraced women, widows, and trained them. On the surface, she ran a sort of orphanage, training these girls to be miko, or shrine maidens. This was a perfect cover. As wandering shrine maidens, they could travel the country freely, collecting donations and performing religious rites, all while gathering intelligence for the Takeda clan. The training of these kunoichi would have been tailored to their mission. While they would have learned some self-defense, the emphasis would have been on skills of deception, manipulation, and information gathering. They would learn how to use makeup and disguises, how to act out various social roles, and how to use their perceived vulnerability as a shield. Their primary weapons were not knives or poisons, but secrets. They could smuggle messages out of a castle by hiding them in their clothing or a musical instrument. The information they provided could be just as decisive as a major battle, tipping the scales of power through whispers and carefully gathered intelligence. The sensationalized image of the seductive assassin completely misses the point of the kunoichi's effectiveness. Their power came not from being objects of desire, but from being underestimated and overlooked. In a rigidly patriarchal society, women were often not seen as a threat. They were considered part of the domestic sphere, separate from the world of war and politics. The kunoichi turned this societal prejudice into a powerful tool for espionage. They weaponized the blind spots of their enemies. Their story is not one of hypersexualized violence, but of clever, resourceful women using the social limitations placed upon them to their own strategic advantage in a dangerous world. So if ninjas were these highly effective, pragmatic masters of unconventional warfare, what happened to them? Why did they fade from the battlefield and into the realm of folklore? The answer is simple and, in a way, tragic for their profession: peace. The entire existence of the ninja was tied to the constant, chaotic warfare of the Sengoku Jidai, the Warring States period of Japan, which lasted from the mid-15th to the early 17th century. This was an era of endless conflict, where dozens of feudal lords vied for power. In such an environment, the skills of the ninja, espionage, sabotage, assassination, were in constant, high demand. They were the ultimate freelancers in a war-torn economy. Everything changed with the victory of Tokugawa Ieyasu at the Battle of Sekigahara in 1600. This decisive battle effectively ended the civil wars and led to the establishment of the Tokugawa shogunate, a centralized military government that would rule Japan for over 250 years. This ushered in a long period of unprecedented peace and stability, known as the Edo period. For most of Japan, this was a golden age of culture and prosperity. But for the ninja, it was a disaster. Peace is bad for business when your business is war. Suddenly, there were no more warring daimyo to spy on, no more castles to infiltrate, and no more supply lines to sabotage. The demand for their unique and violent skill sets simply evaporated. The new Tokugawa regime had a monopoly on military power and intelligence gathering. They established their own official police and spy networks, making the independent ninja clans of Aiga and Koga largely redundant. Some former ninja were absorbed into these official organizations, serving the shogunate as guards or policemen. They put their skills to use in a more structured, state-controlled capacity. But the majority were simply out of a job. They were forced to return to their roots, becoming farmers or common laborers once again. The age of the shadow warrior was over. It is precisely in this period of peace that the myth of the ninja began to truly flourish. As the real shinobi faded from memory, their stories began to be told and retold, growing more exaggerated and fantastical with each telling. The practical, gritty spies of the Sengoku period were transformed into the superhuman figures of legend. Playwrights, artists, and storytellers in the peaceful Edo period romanticized the chaos of the past. The ninja became a popular character in kabuki theater and in woodblock prints. They were depicted with their invisible black suits, their magical abilities, and their impossible feats of martial arts. This fictionalized version was far more entertaining than the reality. Manuals and scrolls about ninjutsu began to appear during this time, like the famous Bansen Shukai, compiled in 1676. These texts collected the knowledge and techniques of the ninja. However, they were often written long after the golden age of the ninja had passed. They were part history, part instruction manual, and part philosophical treatise. They helped to codify and, in some ways, mystify the art of ninjutsu, adding layers of esoteric philosophy and lore to what had once been a purely practical set of survival skills. The ninja were no longer just practitioners of unconventional warfare. They were now masters of a secret, mystical tradition. The legend was taking shape, written down for posterity. This process of mythologizing continued into the 20th and 21st centuries. With the rise of cinema and, later, video games and anime, the ninja was exported to the rest of the world. But it was the theatrical, fantastical version that was exported, not the historical reality. The ninja became a global pop culture icon, a superhero in black pajamas. The image of the silent assassin, capable of impossible feats, was just too cool and too compelling to be constrained by historical accuracy. The myth had become far more powerful and recognizable than the truth it had long since replaced. So when we look back at the history of the ninja, we see two very different figures. There is the historical ninja, the spy, the saboteur, the guerrilla fighter from the lower rungs of society, who used practical tools and clever tricks to survive and serve a purpose in a time of war. They were masters of disguise, information, and psychological warfare. They were effective precisely because they were unremarkable and underestimated. Their goal was to never be seen, known, or remembered. They were the anonymous gears in the great machine of war, their contributions vital but intentionally invisible, their lives a testament to pragmatism in the face of overwhelming odds. Then there is the mythical ninja, the superhuman assassin, the shadow warrior cloaked in black, a master of mystical arts, and a wielder of iconic weapons. This is the figure of legend, born on the theater stage and raised in the pages of fiction and on the silver screen. This ninja is a romantic hero, a lone wolf operating by his own code, a symbol of ultimate coolness and deadly efficiency. This version is a fantasy, a powerful and enduring one, but a fantasy nonetheless. It is a story we tell ourselves because it is more exciting, more straightforward, and more heroic than the complex, messy, and often brutal reality of history. Understanding the difference between these two figures doesn't diminish the ninja. In fact, it makes them more impressive. To strip away the magic and the myth is to reveal the true genius of their methods. It shows a group of people who, faced with the overwhelming power of the samurai class, refused to play by the rules. They invented a new way of fighting, one based on intelligence, deception, and exploiting the weaknesses of their enemies. They turned their low social status into a strength, their common tools into weapons, and their knowledge of human nature into a strategic asset of immense value. The true legacy of the ninja is not in their ability to disappear in a puff of smoke, but in their mastery of asymmetrical warfare. They proved that a smaller, weaker force could challenge and disrupt a larger one through cleverness and unconventional tactics. This is a lesson that has been learned and relearned throughout military history. The ninja were not magicians or demons. They were innovators. They were pragmatists. They were survivors. And in their own quiet, unglamorous, and shadowy way, they were a crucial and fascinating part of the history of Japan, a testament to the power of fighting smarter, not harder. In the end, perhaps the greatest testament to their skill is the fact that we have to work so hard to find the truth about them. The most successful ninja was never caught. Their missions were never discovered. Their names were never recorded in the official histories written by the samurai lords they fought against. They were so good at their jobs, at being invisible, at being forgotten, that they almost succeeded in vanishing from history altogether, leaving behind only the ghost of a legend. The true ninja's victory was in their own anonymity. Let us explore the mindset of a real ninja, not as a warrior but as an information professional. In our modern world, we are inundated with data, but a ninja in feudal Japan lived in a world of information scarcity. Getting a single verifiable fact could be the difference between victory and defeat, life and death. Their primary mission was to transform rumor into intelligence. This required a unique skill set, the ability to listen patiently for hours, the eye for a detail that seems out of place, and the psychological acuity to know who to trust, who to bribe, and who to manipulate to get the information needed. It was a slow, painstaking process of assembling a mosaic of truth from tiny, scattered fragments of gossip and observation. Consider the act of creating a map. Today, we have satellite imagery and GPS. A ninja had to build a map of an enemy castle in their own mind. Disguised as a laborer or a traveling merchant, they would walk the perimeter, counting their paces to measure distances. They would observe the height of the walls by comparing them to a nearby tree. They would note the position of the sun at different times of day to understand the layout and orientation of the buildings. They would pay attention to the flow of water in the moat to find slow-moving sections. This wasn't a single act of daring, but a long, repetitive process of observation, memorization, and mental reconstruction. The final product wasn't a piece of paper, but a perfect mental blueprint of the target. The art of disguise, or henso jutsu, went far beyond simply putting on a costume. It was a form of method acting. To be a convincing monk, a ninja had to know the right prayers and chants. To be a convincing merchant, they needed to know the current prices for goods and the major trade routes. To be a convincing entertainer, they had to actually be able to play an instrument or perform tricks. Each role required deep study and immersion. A flawed performance could mean discovery and a painful death. Therefore, a ninja had to be a jack of all trades, a student of human society who could slip into different social strata as easily as changing a coat, embodying the role so completely that they became it. Let's reconsider the kunai. We see it as a weapon, but its true genius was its utility. Imagine a ninja needing to scale a wooden wall. A sword is useless, but the kunai, with its stout, flat blade, could be hammered into the wood between planks, creating a small but sturdy handhold or foothold. A ninja might carry several, using them to create a makeshift ladder up a surface that would otherwise be unclimbable. Or, pressed against a door, they could use the kunai as a pry bar to pop a lock or break a latch. Its function as a weapon was almost an afterthought. It was the ultimate multi-tool for an infiltrator, embodying the ninja philosophy of practical, purpose-driven design. We often focus on the more aggressive ninja tactics, but a significant portion of their work was defensive. The great unifier Tokugawa Ieyasu, who so famously used Hattori Hanzo's ninja, was also deeply paranoid about being assassinated by them. His castles, like Nijo Castle in Kyoto, are masterpieces of anti-ninja design. They were built with nightingale floors, specially constructed floorboards that would creak and sing like birds at the slightest pressure, making a silent approach impossible. They had hidden rooms for bodyguards, confusing layouts, and numerous concealed alarm systems. The very existence of these defenses tells us how seriously the threat of the ninja was taken by the most powerful people in Japan. The ninja's knowledge of pharmacology and poison was another deeply misunderstood skill. While quick-acting poisons for assassination existed, they were risky. A more common and subtle use of chemistry was for non-lethal purposes. They could use sleeping potions to neutralize guards without killing them, which was far less likely to raise a full-scale alarm. They could use chemicals to create smoke for cover, or to produce noxious fumes to drive people out of a room. They understood the properties of plants and minerals not just for killing, but for manipulating their environment and the people in it. It was a science of control, not just a science of death, applied with precision and subtlety. The social organization of the ninja clans in Iga and Koga was also unique. These regions were functionally a kind of democratic confederacy, very different from the rigid, hierarchical feudal domains that surrounded them. This relative independence and self-governance fostered a spirit of innovation and self-reliance. They weren't bound by the strict codes of the samurai, which gave them the freedom to develop their unconventional tactics. Their ninjutsu was born from a culture of resistance against larger, more powerful outside forces. It was a collective strategy for survival, developed by a community of people who had to rely on their wits to maintain their autonomy. The ninja's relationship with the samurai was complex and often contradictory. On one hand, the samurai class publicly scorned ninja tactics as cowardly and dishonorable. They were seen as beneath a true warrior. On the other hand, nearly every major samurai daimyo employed ninja when it suited their purposes. They were a necessary evil, a dirty but effective tool to be used when honor was less important than victory. This created a strange dynamic where the ninja were simultaneously feared, despised, and essential to the very power structures that looked down on them. They operated in the moral and social gray areas of a society that publicly praised honor while privately rewarding results. Let's talk about the psychological impact of the ninja. Often, the mere rumor that a ninja was operating in the area could be as effective as an actual attack. Their reputation for being silent, unseen killers was a weapon in itself. A lord who feared assassination would sleep poorly, distrust his own servants, and make paranoid, irrational decisions. Spreading a rumor that the lord's food taster was a ninja in disguise could disrupt the entire functioning of his household. The fear of the ninja was a form of psychological poison, weakening an enemy's resolve and coherence from the inside, often without a single ninja ever setting foot inside the castle walls. The training of a ninja started at a young age. It was a comprehensive education in survival. It wasn't just about fighting. Children learned to be light on their feet by practicing balance on logs. They developed their lung capacity for underwater infiltration. They learned to read the weather, to understand the stars for navigation, and to identify edible and poisonous plants. They were taught to endure hardship, to control their breathing, and to remain calm under extreme pressure. It was a holistic curriculum designed to create a person who was perfectly in tune with their environment and in complete control of their own body and mind, a living weapon forged through years of discipline. Let's revisit the concept of the shuriken from a different angle. While not a primary killing weapon, it was an excellent tool for misdirection. Imagine a guard patrolling a wall at night. A shuriken clatters against the stone on his far right. He instinctively turns to investigate the sound. In that moment, the ninja, who is actually on his left, slips past unnoticed. The shuriken was a sound maker, a distraction that exploited basic human reflexes. It was a tool of manipulation, not of lethality. This perfectly encapsulates the ninja philosophy. Why engage in a risky fight when you can bypass the threat entirely with a simple, clever trick that costs you almost nothing? The famous ninja sword, or ninjato, with its straight blade and square guard, is another element that is almost entirely a product of 20th century fiction. There is no historical evidence that ninja used a specific type of sword that was different from what anyone else was using at the time. A ninja would have likely used a standard katana or a shorter wakizashi, the same swords used by samurai and others. They might have customized the scabbard, or saya, to hold other small tools or blinding powder. But the blade itself was not unique. The idea of a special ninja sword was invented for movies because it looked visually distinct and added to the mystique of the character. The art of silent movement, or shinobi oruki, was a core skill. It was more than just tiptoeing. It involved a deep understanding of weight distribution and terrain. A ninja learned to walk on the balls of their feet, to use a special cross-stepping pattern to maintain balance and quiet, and to move in sync with ambient sounds like wind or rain to mask their own noise. When moving across a creaky wooden floor, they would stay close to the walls, where the floorboards were better supported by the foundation beams and less likely to make noise. It was a science of movement, meticulously practiced until it became second nature, allowing them to traverse environments with an eerie, ghost-like silence. Communication was another critical and dangerous part of their work. How does a spy deep in enemy territory get their information back to their commander? They used a variety of clever methods. Coded messages could be written in rice water, becoming visible only when heated. They could use complex systems of knots and ropes, or arrange objects in a specific pattern that would be meaningless to anyone but the intended recipient. They also relied on smoke signals, using different colors of smoke to convey different prearranged messages. And, of course, they used trusted couriers, often disguised kunoichi or children, who were less likely to be searched or suspected. The decline of the ninja was not just about the end of war. It was also about the rise of a new kind of society under the Tokugawa shogunate. This new era emphasized social conformity, strict class divisions, and a rigid bureaucratic order. The very nature of the ninja, their independence, their unconventional methods, their existence outside the established social norms, was a threat to this new order. The government sought to control every aspect of society, and a class of freelance secret agents and saboteurs had no place in this tightly controlled world. They were relics of a more chaotic time, and the new era of peace and order made them obsolete. Let's explore the idea of a failed ninja mission. In the movies, failure means a dramatic fight to the death. In reality, failure for a spy was often much quieter. It could mean being discovered and captured, leading to brutal interrogation and execution. But more often, failure meant simply being unable to acquire the necessary information. A mission could fail because a key official was unexpectedly transferred, or because security was tightened, or because the ninja's disguise was simply not convincing enough to get them into the right room. A professional ninja would know when to abort a mission. The primary goal was survival, to live to spy another day. A quiet retreat was a strategic decision, not a mark of shame. The use of animals by ninja is another fascinating, though often exaggerated, topic. They were known to use cats because their eyes were thought to be able to tell the time based on the dilation of their pupils. They would use rats or mice to create distractions or to carry small incendiary devices into tight spaces. The famous image of a ninja using a kite to fly over a castle wall is pure fantasy, but they did use kites for signaling over long distances or for measuring the height of castle walls. As always, the reality was a practical application of the resources at hand, using the natural world as another tool in their extensive and varied kit. The moral ambiguity of the ninja is one of their most compelling aspects. They were not heroes in the traditional sense, they were mercenaries who served the highest bidder. A ninja clan might work for one lord one year, and for his mortal enemy the next. Their loyalty was to their clan and to their contract, not to any grand cause or ideology. This makes them profoundly modern characters in a way. They were pragmatists, operating in a world of shifting alliances, doing what was necessary to survive and profit. They were the ultimate professionals, separating their work from any personal feelings or grand notions of honor, a mindset that was both revolutionary and terrifying to the samurai of their time. The legacy of ninjutsu today is a mixed bag. On one hand, you have the global pop culture phenomenon, which is mostly fiction. On the other, you have modern martial arts schools that claim to teach authentic ninjutsu. Some of these schools have genuine historical lineages tracing back to the Edo period, preserving some of the techniques and philosophies. However, they are teaching a systematized martial art, which is very different from the holistic, ad hoc set of survival skills practiced by the original shinobi. Modern ninjutsu is an art form. Historical ninjutsu was a trade, a brutal and practical response to a specific set of historical circumstances. Ultimately, the story of the ninja is a powerful reminder that history is written by the victors, and often by the loudest voices. The samurai had their code, their poets, their chroniclers. They wrote their own story, one of honor and glorious battle. The ninja operated in silence, and their stories were passed down in secret or transformed into folklore. To find the real ninja, we have to listen to the silences in the historical record, to read between the lines of the official chronicles, and to understand that the most effective acts of espionage and sabotage are the ones that leave no trace at all. The ninja's story is the story of the unseen hand that shaped a history that refused to acknowledge it. Let's analyze the economic role of a ninja. In the war-torn Sengoku period, they were essentially high-skilled contractors in a gig economy fueled by conflict. A daimyo would not keep a large standing army of ninja on a permanent payroll. Instead, they would hire a clan from Iga or Koga for a specific mission with a clear objective and a set price. This could range from a simple reconnaissance mission to a full-scale campaign of arson and sabotage. The ninja clans operated like a specialized consulting firm, providing a unique and valuable service that most traditional armies were not equipped to handle. Their success was based on their reputation for delivering results, discreetly and effectively. The ninjas' mastery of psychology extended to their own image. They did not discourage the terrifying rumors about themselves. In fact, they likely cultivated them. The more superhuman and demonic their reputation, the more fear they inspired, which was a powerful weapon in itself. A fearful enemy is a predictable enemy. They will make mistakes. They will overcommit resources to defending against imagined threats. By allowing the legend to grow, the ninja could manipulate their enemies, perceptions, and behavior on a mass scale, turning folklore into a tangible strategic advantage without lifting a finger. It was the ultimate form of psychological warfare, waged in the minds of their opponents. Consider the mundane reality of a stakeout. A ninja might have to hide in a cramped, uncomfortable space, under a floor, in a ceiling crawl space, or in dense undergrowth, for days at a time. This required incredible physical and mental endurance. They would have to remain perfectly still, enduring hunger, thirst, and the elements, all while staying completely alert. This is the unglamorous reality of intelligence work that is never shown in the movies. It is not about a few moments of exciting action, but about hundreds of hours of excruciating boredom and discipline, waiting for that one single moment when a critical piece of information is revealed. The concept of ninjutsu itself is often misunderstood as just a fighting style. The jutsu in its name means art or technique. Nin can mean stealth, endurance, or perseverance. So ninjutsu is more accurately translated as the art of perseverance or the art of stealth. It was an overarching philosophy that encompassed a huge range of skills: survival, camouflage, medicine, strategy, meteorology, in addition to combat. The fighting techniques were just one small part of a much larger body of knowledge designed to ensure a person could survive and complete a mission against overwhelming odds. It was a complete system for a shadow operative. The tools of the ninja were often designed to be disposable. A ninja operating deep in enemy territory could not afford to be caught with incriminating, specialized equipment. Therefore, many of their tools were either disguised as everyday objects, like the kunai or kama, or they were crafted from natural materials on site. They might fashion a simple blowgun from a piece of bamboo, or create a makeshift rope from woven vines. This emphasis on improvisation and disposability meant that even if a tool was found, it wouldn't necessarily scream ninja. It was a low-tech, low-signature approach that prioritized the safety and deniability of the operative above all else. Let's delve into the idea of the castle as a puzzle. For a ninja, a fortress was not an impenetrable barrier. It was a complex system of locks, guards, and routines that could be studied and solved. They were, in essence, the first penetration testers. They would probe for weaknesses, not just in the physical structure, but in the human systems that ran it. A lazy guard, a poorly secured gate, a predictable patrol schedule. These were the vulnerabilities they sought to exploit. Their approach was analytical and methodical. They would observe, gather data, form a hypothesis about the best way in, and then execute their plan with precision, like a locksmith opening a complex safe. The role of sound in a ninja's life was paramount. They were masters of both silence and noise. They learned to move without a sound, but they also learned to interpret the sounds of their environment. The call of a certain bird could be a prearranged signal from a partner. The sound of dogs barking in a specific pattern could indicate a security patrol's location. They were also masters of creating sound for misdirection, as with the shuriken. They could mimic animal calls to communicate or to cover their own movements. Their world was an acoustic landscape, and they navigated it with the skill of a master musician, playing their own tune of silence and deception. The relationship between ninjutsu and Buddhism, particularly esoteric sects like Shingon and Tendai, is a fascinating and complex area. Some ninja clans incorporated elements of Buddhist meditation and philosophy into their training. The practice of kujikiri, the 9 symbolic hand gestures often shown in movies, has its roots in these esoteric traditions. For the ninja, these practices were likely less about gaining supernatural powers and more about developing intense mental focus, discipline, and a sense of detachment from fear and ego. It was a form of mental conditioning that prepared them for the extreme psychological pressures of their work, a spiritual technology for honing the mind into a perfect tool. The end of the ninja era can be seen in the story of Shimabara Rebellion in 1638. This was an uprising of mostly Japanese Catholic peasants. The Tokugawa shogunate had difficulty breaching the rebels' fortress at Hara Castle. In a final, desperate move, they hired a group of ninja from the Koga clan to infiltrate the castle and gather intelligence on its defenses and supply situation. This is one of the last recorded official uses of ninja in a major military campaign. It was a final curtain call for the Shadow Warriors, a last display of their unique skills before the long peace of the Edo period rendered them a relic of a bygone, more violent age. When we think of a ninja's senses, we focus on sight and hearing. But their sense of smell was also a critical tool. They could detect the scent of wood smoke to locate an encampment from a great distance. They could identify the smell of certain chemicals or poisons. They might even use strong-smelling substances on their own clothes to throw off tracking dogs. In a world without modern technology, every sense had to be honed to its absolute peak. A ninja's body was a highly calibrated sensory instrument, constantly reading the subtle signals of the environment to build a complete picture of the world around them and the threats it contained. The ninja's code, if they had one, was survival and success. Unlike the samurai's bushido, which was a rigid code of honor that often led to glorious but pointless deaths, the ninja's philosophy was fluid and pragmatic. It was perfectly acceptable to run from a fight you couldn't win. It was wise to use deception and trickery against a stronger foe. Honor was a luxury they could not afford. This doesn't make them immoral, but rather it places them in a different moral universe. Their primary duty was to their clan and their client, and the most honorable thing they could do was to complete the mission successfully and return alive to be paid. Let's consider the simple act of climbing a tree. For a ninja, this was a fundamental skill for observation, escape, and infiltration. But they didn't just climb. They learned which trees had the strongest branches, which had the best foliage for cover, and how to move through the canopy without shaking the leaves. They became experts in the natural architecture of the forest, using it as a three-dimensional highway that kept them hidden from enemies moving on the ground. The forest was not an obstacle. It was a sanctuary and an ally, and they knew its secrets as well as any forester. The idea of a ninja clan can be misleading. We imagine a secret society with hidden dojos and elaborate rituals. The reality was likely more grounded. A clan was often an extended family, or a community of families living in a specific village or region. Like Iga or Koga, the ninjutsu skills were a local tradition, passed down from generation to generation out of necessity for self-defense and as a source of income. It was a family business, and the family business was survival and espionage. The secrets were kept not because of some mystical oath, but because revealing them would endanger their families and their livelihood. The ninjas' understanding of anatomy was practical and brutal. They did not need to be surgeons, but they needed to know exactly where to strike for maximum effect with minimum effort. They knew the locations of major arteries, nerve clusters, and vulnerable joints. This knowledge was used not just for killing, but for incapacitating. A precise strike to a nerve in the arm could disable a swordsman without killing him. This knowledge allowed them to be incredibly efficient in close-quarters combat, ending a confrontation quickly and quietly before an alarm could be raised. It was a science of targeted violence. The ultimate irony of the ninja is that their success led to their legend, and their legend erased their success. They were so good at being secret, practical, and unglamorous that history had to invent a more exciting story for them. We replaced the patient spy with the acrobatic assassin, the clever trickster with the magician. We did this because the reality of the ninja's work, the long hours of waiting, the morally gray choices, the mundane details of espionage, is less comfortable and less entertaining. But it is in that reality that their true genius lies. They were not superheroes. They were something far more impressive. Survivors who mastered the art of the possible in an impossible world. Let's re-examine the role of fire. We've talked about arson, but ninja also used fire in smaller, more subtle ways. A small, smokeless flame could be used to read a stolen document in the dead of night. They developed techniques for starting fires with friction or flint and steel, even in damp conditions. They also knew how to fight fire, a critical skill when their own missions could involve incendiary devices. Fire was a tool, like any other, to be understood, controlled, and deployed with tactical precision. It was both a weapon of mass destruction and a personal utility, demonstrating the incredible breadth of their practical knowledge. The concept of the void in martial philosophy, often associated with the famous samurai Miyamoto Musashi, was also relevant to the ninja. It is the idea of achieving a state of mind that is empty of fear, anger, and ego, allowing one to react perfectly and instinctively to any situation. For a ninja on a mission, achieving this mental state was critical. A mind clouded by fear will make mistakes. A mind driven by anger will be reckless. The ninja's training in meditation and mental discipline was aimed at achieving this state of calm clarity, allowing them to be perfect observers and actors, unburdened by the internal noise that leads to fatal errors. The ninja's diet was another aspect of their training. They were masters of foraging, able to live off the land for extended periods. They knew which plants were edible, which had medicinal properties, and which were poisonous. On a mission, they would carry lightweight, high-energy preserved foods like dried rice, plums and fish. They understood that nutrition was fundamental to their performance. A well-fed ninja had more stamina, was more alert, and could endure more hardship. It was another example of their holistic approach, where every aspect of life was optimized for the successful completion of their work. Let's consider the ninja's role after a mission was complete. They delivered their intelligence, they collected their pay. What then? They went home. They returned to their farms, their families, their villages in Iga and Koga. They melted back into the rural landscape. This ability to switch off, to return to a civilian life, was part of their disguise. Their neighbors would know them as farmers, not as the secret agents who had just returned from toppling a distant lord. This duality was essential for their long-term survival and the security of their clans. They were ghosts on the battlefield and simple farmers at home. The story of Ishikawa Goemon is a classic example of how a real historical figure can be absorbed into ninja folklore. Goemon was a real-life outlaw from the 16th century, a sort of Japanese Robin Hood figure who was eventually captured and boiled alive in an iron cauldron. Over time, storytellers embellished his legend, granting him incredible ninja skills and making him a master thief from the Yaga clan. He became a folk hero, a symbol of rebellion against the authorities. Whether the historical Goemon had any actual ninja training is highly debatable, but his story shows the process by which any mysterious or rebellious figure from that era could be retroactively labeled a ninja. The ninja's understanding of weather was a significant tactical advantage. They knew that a rainy night provided excellent cover for sound and movement. They knew that a foggy morning was ideal for a discreet escape. They could read the clouds to predict a coming storm and use it to their advantage. A mission's timing was often dictated by the weather forecast, which they had to create themselves through careful observation of the natural world. This attunement to their environment gave them an edge over less observant enemies who saw the weather as merely an inconvenience, rather than a strategic variable to be exploited. We should also touch upon the sheer physical fitness required. The training regimen of a ninja would rival that of any modern special forces soldier. They had to be able to run for miles, swim long distances, climb sheer surfaces, and hold their breath for extended periods. They possessed incredible acrobatic ability, not for showy flips, but for practical movement, vaulting over obstacles, falling without injury, and moving with speed and agility through complex environments. This peak physical conditioning was the fundamental platform upon which all their other skills were built. Without it, the rest of their training would be useless. The tools for escape were just as important as the tools for infiltration. A ninja would always have an escape plan. They might use caltrops, small spike devices called tetsubishi, scattered on the ground behind them to slow down pursuers. We've already discussed the metsubushi, or blinding powder. They also used grappling hooks, not just for climbing up, but for swinging across gaps, or for rapid descents. Their clothing was often designed to be easily shed if grabbed. Every element of their kit and training was geared towards one principle: get in, do the job, and get out alive. Escape was not a sign of failure. It was the final, successful step of a completed mission. It is important to remember that ninjutsu was not a single, monolithic art. Different clans in different regions had their own unique styles and techniques, developed based on their local environment and experiences. The ninja of Koga might have specialized in different techniques from the ninja of Iga. Some might have been more known for their skill in explosives, others for their mastery of poisons, and others for their skill in maritime infiltration. It was a diverse and adaptable tradition, not a rigid, standardized curriculum. The only common thread was the underlying philosophy of pragmatism, deception, and survival. The popular image of a ninja fighting a samurai in a one-on-one duel is perhaps the biggest misconception of all. A ninja would do everything in their power to avoid a direct, fair fight with a samurai. A samurai was a specialist in open combat, heavily armored and wielding one of the finest weapons ever made. It would be suicidal for a lightly armored ninja to engage one on equal terms. A ninja's approach to combat was to not have combat at all, or, if unavoidable, to make it as unfair as possible, attacking from behind, from the dark, using poison, traps, or overwhelming numbers. Victory was the goal, not a good fight. The ninja's influence can be seen in the very architecture of Japan. The complex, maze-like layouts of some castles, the nightingale floors, the hidden passages and secret rooms. These were all part of a centuries-long arms race between attackers and defenders. The ninja represented the ultimate threat of infiltration, and castle design evolved specifically to counter their unique and insidious methods. In this way, even though they operated in the shadows, their impact is literally built into the foundations of some of Japan's most famous historical landmarks. They were a force so significant that they changed the very shape of the buildings they sought to penetrate. Let's consider the ninja's legacy in the world of intelligence. Many of the core tenets of their work are still fundamental to espionage today. The importance of human intelligence, the use of disguise and cover stories, the art of surveillance and counter-surveillance, the use of dead drops for communication, and the strategic deployment of disinformation. While the technology has changed dramatically, the underlying human dynamics and psychological principles of spying have remained remarkably consistent. The ninja of feudal Japan were early pioneers in a field of secret warfare that continues to shape global politics to this day. The ninja's story teaches us a valuable lesson about how we view history. We are drawn to simple narratives, to clear heroes and villains. The ninja complicates this. They were not righteous heroes, nor were they purely evil villains. They were complex professionals in a brutal business. Their story forces us to look beyond the grand narratives of great battles and honorable lords, and to appreciate the hidden currents of history, the quiet acts of sabotage, the whispered secrets, the desperate measures taken by those on the margins that often have a far greater impact than we realize. So the next time you see that iconic image of a ninja in black perched on a rooftop, remember the far more complex reality. Remember the farmer in disguise, the patient spy in the kitchen, the engineer studying a castle wall, the psychologist spreading a rumor, and the survivor who used their wits to navigate a world of violence. The real ninja was not a creature of myth and magic. They were a product of human ingenuity, desperation, and the timeless art of unconventional thinking. In the end, the ninja's greatest trick was making us believe in the legend. The legend became their final perfect disguise. By hiding behind the mask of the superhuman assassin, the true historical ninja, the practical, resourceful, and all-too-human spy, achieved a final perfect invisibility. Their true story was their greatest secret, and for centuries they managed to keep it, leaving us with a shadow puppet show that was far more dramatic, but far less real than the person pulling the strings. Let's explore the concept of guerrilla warfare in the context of the ninja. This term, coined centuries later, perfectly describes their military doctrine. The mountainous regions of Aiga and Koga were not suitable for the large, organized armies of the samurai. The local warriors, the proto-ninja, learned to use the terrain to their advantage. They would stage ambushes in narrow mountain passes, conduct hit-and-run raids on enemy supply lines, and then melt back into the forests and villages where they were indistinguishable from the local populace. They refused to engage the enemy on their terms, forcing the samurai into a type of warfare they were ill-equipped and untrained to fight. This was the strategic genius of their entire approach. Consider the role of water in ninjutsu. Sutenjutsu, or the art of water techniques, was a critical skill set. This went beyond just swimming silently. It involved techniques for underwater combat, the use of reeds or bamboo stalks as breathing tubes for long-term submersion, and the creation of small, inflatable rafts from animal skins for crossing moats or rivers. They understood currents and tides. An enemy castle was often surrounded by a moat as its primary defense, so mastery of water was essential for any infiltrator. To the guards on the wall, Seeing a figure emerge from the water after a long, silent crossing would have seemed like black magic, reinforcing the ninja's supernatural reputation. The kujikiri, those 9 symbolic hand gestures, deserve a closer look. While pop culture portrays them as a way to cast spells, their actual purpose was likely a form of self-hypnosis or meditative focusing. Each hand seal is associated with a specific concept, such as strength, awareness, or healing. By performing the sequence, a ninja could mentally prepare for a mission, calming their nerves, sharpening their focus, and banishing fear. It was a psychological ritual, a way to enter the optimal mental state for a high-stakes operation. It wasn't about casting a spell on an enemy, but about casting a spell of absolute focus and control upon oneself. The economic desperation that fueled the rise of the ninja cannot be overstated. The Sengoku period was a time of immense suffering for the peasant class. They were subject to constant warfare, heavy taxation, and the whims of their ruling lords. For many young men and women in provinces like Iga and Koga, becoming a shinobi was one of the few available paths to social mobility and economic security. It was a dangerous profession, but it paid well and offered a degree of autonomy that was unthinkable for a common farmer. It was a rational economic choice born from a desperate situation, a career path forged in the crucible of war and poverty. Let's talk about the simple tool of a rope. For a ninja, a rope was one of the most versatile and essential pieces of equipment. They were masters of knots, able to tie and untie them quickly in the dark. A rope could be used with a grappling hook for climbing, for tying up a captured sentry, for setting traps and snares, or for creating a makeshift bridge across a chasm. They would often use ropes made of hair from women or horsetails, as these were said to be stronger and quieter than traditional hemp ropes. The humble rope, in the hands of a ninja, became an instrument of extraordinary mobility and control over the environment. A ninja's skill in acting was not just for disguise, it was for manipulation. A ninja might feign injury to lure a compassionate guard into a trap. They might pretend to be a fool to be underestimated and ignored. They could simulate terror to create a panic that would serve as a diversion. They were masters of playing on the emotions and preconceptions of others. This required a deep, intuitive understanding of human psychology. They knew that people are quick to believe what they want to believe or what they expect to see, and they used this cognitive bias as a weapon, turning an enemy's mind against itself. The decline of the ninja can also be attributed to the rise of the firearm. While early firearms, like the arquebus, were slow and unreliable, they began to change the face of Japanese warfare in the late 16th century. The skills of the ninja, which were so effective against swords and spears, were less so against a volley of gunfire from a distance. The new technology democratized killing and made the individual skill of a warrior, whether samurai or ninja, less relevant. The age of massed infantry with firearms had begun, and the age of the specialized clandestine operative was slowly drawing to a close on the battlefield. Let's explore the idea of failure from the client's perspective. If a daimyo hired a ninja clan to assassinate a rival and the mission failed, what happened? The consequences could be severe. The failed attempt would alert the rival lord, who would then increase his security and likely retaliate. The daimyo who hired the ninja might be exposed, leading to a full-scale war or political ruin. This is why assassination was such a high-risk, high-reward option. A successful mission could cripple an enemy, but a failed one could backfire spectacularly. Espionage and sabotage were often the preferred, safer investments, offering significant strategic advantages with less catastrophic potential for blowback. The ninja's toolkit included a variety of specialized listening devices. A Saoto no Hako was a type of wooden box designed to amplify faint sounds, which a ninja could press against a wall to better hear conversations in the next room. They also used listening tubes, or mimizutu, which worked on the same principle. These simple acoustic devices show their commitment to their primary role as spies. They were constantly innovating, creating new technologies to solve the practical problems of intelligence gathering. It was a world of low-tech but highly effective gadgets, designed for the singular purpose of learning secrets. The ninja's legacy and language is also interesting. The words shinobi and ninja both refer to the same type of person. Shinobi is the native Japanese reading of the characters, while ninja is the Sino-Japanese reading. The term shinobi no mano literally means a person who steals away, or a person who endures. This name itself focuses on their key attributes, stealth and perseverance. It doesn't say assassin or warrior. The very name they were known by describes their methods, not their results, highlighting that the process of stealth and endurance was the core of their identity. Let's consider the counterintelligence efforts against the ninja. As the ninja's reputation grew, daimyos invested heavily in security measures. They used trained guard dogs, which were difficult to fool with disguises. They laid gravel in courtyards, as it is almost impossible to walk on silently. We've mentioned nightingale floors and complex layouts. They would also employ double agents, trying to infiltrate the ninja clans themselves. This created a constant, shadowy war of spy versus spy, a complex game of deception and betrayal, where it was often difficult to know who was truly working for whom. The world of the ninja was one of deep paranoia and constant vigilance. The ninja's knowledge of escape routes was encyclopedic. Before infiltrating a castle, they would spend just as much time studying the exterior and surrounding area as the interior. They would identify multiple potential escape routes, a weak point in a wall, a large tree near the moat, a section of the sewer system that could be accessed. They planned for failure. The mission wasn't truly planned until the escape was just as meticulously thought out as the infiltration. This mindset is a hallmark of elite special forces to this day. The mission isn't over until you are safely back at base. The portrayal of ninja fighting with two swords is another common movie trope. While some swordsmen, like the famous Miyamoto Musashi, did develop a two-sword style, it was not standard practice for ninja. Carrying two swords was cumbersome and could impede movement, especially when climbing or hiding in tight spaces. A ninja prioritized mobility and stealth above all else. They would more likely carry one shorter sword, like a wakizashi, and a variety of other smaller, more versatile tools and weapons. The cool factor of dual wielding in movies rarely aligns with the practical realities of a real covert operation. Let's think about the transmission of knowledge. How were these complex skills passed down? Primarily through oral tradition and direct apprenticeship. A veteran shinobi would take on a young apprentice, often a family member, and teach them through years of hands-on training. The knowledge was a closely guarded trade secret. Written manuals like the Bansen Shukai were rare and were compiled late in the ninja's history, more as an encyclopedia or a historical record than as a primary teaching tool. The real learning happened in the forests and mountains, in mock missions and grueling physical conditioning, a direct transfer of embodied knowledge from master to student. The ultimate fate of the Aiga and Koga clans is a dramatic story in itself. The powerful warlord Oda Nobunaga, who was trying to unify Japan, saw the independent and defiant ninja confederacies as a major threat to his authority. In 1581, he launched a massive, brutal invasion of Iga province, known as the Tensho Iga War. He invaded with an overwhelming force of tens of thousands of soldiers and effectively crushed the Aiga resistance, burning villages and slaughtering many. While the Aiga ninja were not completely wiped out, many survivors, led by Hattori Hanzo, went on to serve Tokugawa Ieyasu. It was a devastating blow that marked the beginning of the end for their independence. The ninja's use of makeup and prosthetics should not be underestimated. This went beyond a simple disguise. They could use waxes and pastes to alter the shape of their nose or chin. They could use dyes to change their hair color, or create the appearance of scars or blemishes. They could use small pebbles in their shoes to give themselves a convincing limp. This was the art of transformation at a granular level. The goal was not just to wear a costume, but to fundamentally alter their appearance in a way that would stand up to close scrutiny, allowing them to maintain their cover even when in close proximity to the enemy. The role of silence in the ninja's philosophy is profound. It was not just the absence of sound, it was a state of being. To be silent was to be unnoticeable, to move through the world without leaving a trace. It was also a state of mind, to have a silent, calm mind, free from the chatter of fear and doubt. In a world that was loud with the clash of swords and the proclamations of lords, the ninja found their power in the opposite. They understood that true power does not always need to announce itself. Sometimes, the most powerful force in the room is the one that no one even knows is there. The relationship between the ninja and the Yamabushi, or mountain ascetics, is another intriguing connection. The Yamabushi were warrior monks who lived in the mountains and practiced a blend of Buddhism and Shintoism. They were known for their physical endurance, their knowledge of the wilderness, and their martial skills. It is highly likely that the ninja learned a great deal from the Yamabushi, or that there was a significant overlap between the two groups. They shared the same environment, and both operated outside the mainstream of samurai society, developing skills for survival and self-defense in the harshness of the mountains. Consider the simple act of breathing. For a ninja, breath control was a fundamental discipline. They practiced techniques to slow their heart rate and breathing, which allowed them to conserve energy, remain calm under pressure, and stay hidden for longer periods without making a sound. The ability to hold one's breath for several minutes was essential for underwater infiltration, or for hiding in a space with limited air. It was a core skill that connected their physical and mental training, a way of exerting conscious control over the autonomic functions of the body, turning their own physiology into another tool for the mission. Finally, let's reflect on why the myth of the ninja persists so strongly. It's because the ninja represents a fantasy of ultimate personal agency and competence. In a complex and often frustrating world, the ninja is a figure who can move through any obstacle, overcome any enemy, and achieve any objective through sheer skill and willpower. They are a symbol of control in a chaotic world. The fantasy is more appealing than the reality of the desperate, resourceful spy because the fantasy empowers us. It's a story of a single person triumphing over the system, a timeless and deeply attractive narrative that will likely ensure the black-clad ninja of legend will continue to haunt our imaginations for centuries to come. Let's consider the concept of Kyojitsu Tenkan-ho, the ninja art of mixing truth and falsehood. This was a sophisticated psychological tactic. A ninja spy wouldn't just invent lies. They would weave their disinformation around a core of verifiable truth. This made their lies much more believable. For example, they might report accurately on an enemy's troop numbers, but lie about their morale or their intended direction of attack. By providing some true information, they would build credibility, making the crucial piece of false information more likely to be accepted and acted upon by their own commander, or, if they were a double agent, by the enemy. It was the art of making lies plausible. The ninja's knowledge of construction and engineering was surprisingly deep. To infiltrate a castle, they needed to understand how it was built. They knew the weak points of a stone wall, the typical construction of a gatehouse, and the layout of wooden support beams under a floor. This knowledge was essential for sabotage as well. To bring down a bridge or a watchtower effectively, they needed to know exactly where to place an explosive charge or where to cut the support structures. They were, in a sense, reverse engineers, deconstructing the work of architects and builders for their own destructive or covert purposes. The idea of the ninja as a solitary lone wolf is a powerful myth, but the reality was that they almost always worked in teams. A mission to infiltrate a large castle would require a team of specialists. One ninja might be an expert climber, responsible for getting the team over the outer wall. Another might be an expert in locks and traps. A third might be the master of disguise, responsible for the team's cover story. They operated like a modern special forces unit, with each member having a specific role to play. The success of the mission depended on their seamless cooperation and trust in one another's skills. The role of ritual in a ninja's life was a stabilizing force. Before a mission, a ninja might visit a shrine to pray for success. They would meticulously check and recheck their equipment. They would perform their Kujikiri meditation. These rituals were not about magic. They were about process and mental preparation. They provided a sense of order and control in a profession defined by chaos and uncertainty. By following a familiar sequence of actions, a ninja could ground themselves, focus their mind, and build the confidence needed to face the extreme dangers that lay ahead. It was a psychological anchor in a sea of peril. Let's consider the aftermath of the Tensho Iga War. While a disaster for the Iga clans, it also ironically cemented their reputation. Oda Nobunaga's massive invasion was a testament to how seriously he took the threat. The fact that it took one of the most powerful warlords in Japan and an army of over 40,000 men to subdue a small province of farmers spoke volumes about their effectiveness. The stories of the Iga ninjas' fierce resistance, even in defeat, became legendary and served as the ultimate advertisement for the skills of the survivors who went on to find employment with other lords, most notably Tokugawa Ieyasu. The ninjas' use of non-lethal weapons was extensive. We've discussed caltrops and blinding powder. They also used grappling hooks and chains, kusarigama, not just to kill, but to entangle an opponent's weapon or limbs, disarming or disabling them without creating a fatal wound. A dead sentry is a clear sign of intrusion, but a sentry who has been knocked unconscious or temporarily disabled might be dismissed as clumsy or drunk, buying the ninja precious time. The goal was always to complete the mission with the minimum level of disturbance necessary. Lethality was a tool, but it was not always the most effective one. The concept of reading the air, or kuki wo yomu, is a central part of Japanese culture, and it was an essential skill for a ninja. It is the ability to understand a social situation, the unspoken dynamics, and the mood of a room without any explicit communication. A ninja in disguise had to be a master of this. They had to know when to speak and when to be silent, when to be deferential and when to be assertive. A single social misstep, a failure to read the air correctly, could expose them. This deep, intuitive social intelligence was just as important as their physical skills. The physical evidence for ninja history is scarce, which is, in itself, evidence of their success. They operated in secret and used disposable or disguised tools. They did not keep written records of their missions. The official histories were written by their samurai employers or enemies, who had their own agendas. Therefore, historians have to piece together the story from scattered references, late-period manuals, and archaeological finds of things like shuriken or climbing tools. The ninja's story is a puzzle with most of the pieces missing, and we are left to reconstruct the picture from the faint outlines that remain. The financial aspect of a ninja's life is often overlooked. They were mercenaries, and they expected to be paid. Negotiations for a contract could be complex. The price would depend on the difficulty and risk of the mission. A simple reconnaissance mission would be relatively cheap, while a high-risk assassination of a well-guarded target would command an enormous fee. The ninja clans were businesses, and they had to manage their finances, pay their operatives, and invest in training and equipment. They were a vital, if shadowy, part of the war economy of feudal Japan, providing specialized services for a price. The ninja's connection to the sea, particularly the coastal ninja or kaizoku, often translated as pirates, is another fascinating dimension. These groups operated along the coasts, raiding ships in coastal settlements. They had to be expert sailors and swimmers, and their skills in stealth and sabotage were perfectly suited for maritime operations. They could sneak onto enemy ships at night, set them on fire, or assassinate their captains. They were a naval special forces unit, using the sea as their domain and their avenue for attack, demonstrating the adaptability of the ninja skill set to different environments. The evolution of the ninja myth in the West is a story in itself. It began in earnest after World War II, with soldiers returning from Japan with stories and martial arts knowledge. The 1960s saw a ninja boom in Japanese cinema, and these films were eventually exported. But the true explosion in popularity came in the 1980s, with a flood of often low-budget, highly sensationalized martial arts movies and the rise of ninja characters in comic books and video games. This decade solidified the image of the black-clad, shuriken-throwing superhuman assassin in the Western popular imagination, a process that had very little to do with actual history. Let's consider the ethics of a ninja. They were often tasked with actions that we would today consider war crimes: assassination, poisoning wells, targeting civilian resources like food supplies. However, we must judge them in the context of their time. The Sengoku period was an era of total war, where the distinction between combatant and non-combatant was often blurred. The ninjas' tactics, while brutal, were often a rational response to the overwhelming force of their enemies. They were doing what was necessary to survive, and to give their employers an edge in a conflict where the rules were few and the stakes were absolute. The simple act of information verification was a major challenge. A ninja might hear a rumor, but how could they confirm it? This required cross-referencing information from multiple sources. They might have a network of low-level informants, servants, merchants, monks, scattered throughout a region. A piece of information would only be considered reliable if it was confirmed by several independent sources. This process was slow and painstaking, but it was essential for distinguishing valuable intelligence from simple gossip or deliberate disinformation planted by the enemy. They were, in essence, investigative journalists operating in a war zone. The role of memory in ninjutsu was critical. A ninja couldn't risk carrying written notes or maps, as these could be captured. They had to commit vast amounts of information to memory: the layout of a castle, the faces of key officials, the details of a guard patrol schedule, a coded message. They developed mnemonic techniques and memory palaces to store and recall this information with perfect clarity. A ninja's mind was their most important and most secure notebook, a highly organized database of secret knowledge that could not be taken from them, even under torture. The ninja's influence on Japanese gardens is a subtle but interesting point. Some traditional gardens are designed with meandering paths, blind corners, and strategically placed rocks and lanterns. While primarily for aesthetic reasons, this design philosophy also has a defensive aspect. It creates a landscape that is difficult to move through quickly and silently, with many potential hiding places for guards and ambush points. It reflects a culture that was deeply aware of the potential for stealth and surprise, a mindset shaped in part by the ever-present, though unseen, threat of the ninja. The legend of the ninja has often been used for political purposes. During the peaceful Edo period, the shogunate sometimes promoted the terrifying folklore of the ninja as a way to discourage rebellion. The stories served as a warning. The government has unseen eyes and ears everywhere, so do not even think of plotting against it. The myth became a tool of state control, a bogeyman used to maintain social order. Later, in the 20th century, the image of the ninja was sometimes used as a symbol of Japanese uniqueness and martial prowess, a part of the nation's cultural identity. The kunoichi's toolkit would have been different from a male ninja's. While a man might hide a blade in a walking staff, a woman could hide a small dagger in her hairpins, kenzashi, or a garrote wire in her sash, obi. They were also masters of using, quote, female items as weapons. A fan could be used to conceal a thrown needle. A mirror could be used to reflect sunlight and signal a distant partner. They were experts at weaponizing the everyday objects of their gender role, turning the symbols of their perceived domesticity into instruments of espionage and self-defense. The ninja's relationship with fear was complex. They were not fearless, which would be reckless. Instead, they were masters of fear. They learned to control their own fear through mental and physical discipline. And they learned how to manipulate the fear of others, using their reputation and psychological tricks to terrorize and disorient their enemies. Fear was both a personal obstacle to be overcome and a powerful weapon to be wielded. Their ability to operate on both sides of this emotional equation was a key to their success. The end of a ninja's career was likely quiet. Unlike a samurai who might retire with honor and a pension, a ninja simply faded away. As they aged, their physical abilities would decline, making high-risk missions impossible. They would then transition into other roles within the clan, becoming teachers, strategists, or intelligence analysts, passing on their accumulated wisdom to the next generation. Their final contribution was not on the battlefield, but in the training grounds, ensuring that the clan's knowledge and skills would endure. Ultimately, the ninja represents the eternal appeal of the secret. They are the keepers of hidden knowledge, the masters of unseen paths, the figures who know what is really going on behind the closed doors of power. This is a deeply seductive idea. It taps into our suspicion that the world is not what it seems, that there are hidden forces at play. The ninja gives a face to this suspicion, a human form to the power of secrets. It is this connection to the allure of the unknown that gives the ninja myth its incredible staying power, long after the historical reality has faded into the shadows. Let's consider the ninja's role in naval warfare more deeply. Japan is an island nation, and control of the sea was vital. Ninja were employed to sabotage enemy fleets. They would swim out to anchored ships at night, using specialized tools to drill holes in the hulls below the waterline. The holes would be plugged with a material that would dissolve after a few hours. By the time the fleet set sail the next day, the ships would begin taking on water in the open sea, causing chaos and sinking vessels without a single arrow being fired. This was a devastatingly effective form of asymmetrical naval warfare. The art of disguise, hensojutsu, also involved changing one's body language and speech patterns. To pose as a high-ranking samurai, a ninja would have to adopt an arrogant, confident posture and speak in a formal, commanding tone. To pose as a humble peasant, they would have to stoop, avert their eyes when speaking to superiors, and use a rough regional dialect. This was a total transformation of self. The ninja had to be a skilled linguist and sociologist, able to accurately mimic the subtle class markers that defined Japanese society, because a single misplaced word or gesture could betray them. The ninja's knowledge of herbal medicine was not just for healing themselves. It could also be used offensively. They could use plants that caused severe rashes, stomach ailments, or hallucinations. These were not always lethal, but they could incapacitate a guard, create a diversion, or discredit an official by making them appear sick or insane. This biological warfare was subtle and difficult to trace. It allowed the ninja to neutralize threats and sow chaos in a way that seemed like natural illness or bad luck, preserving their own anonymity and leaving their enemies confused and weakened. The training for pain tolerance was brutal and essential. A captured ninja faced the prospect of horrific torture. Through meditation, physical hardship, and sheer force of will, they trained their minds to dissociate from pain, to control their body's responses. The goal was to protect the clan's secrets at all costs. This discipline also served them on missions, allowing them to ignore injuries and continue functioning when a normal person would be incapacitated. It was a hardening of the body and mind, forging them into instruments that could withstand almost any physical or psychological pressure. The five elements philosophy, or Godai, from esoteric Buddhism, earth, water, fire, wind, void, was sometimes used as a framework for ninjutsu strategy. Earth could represent using terrain and solid defenses. Water could represent adaptability and stealth. Fire represented aggressive attacks and arson. Wind represented open movement and knowledge. Void represented using the enemy's own energy against them and achieving a state of pure awareness. This wasn't a literal guide, but a philosophical model for thinking about strategy in a holistic and flexible way. The ninja's role in the world of commerce should not be ignored. A daimyo might hire a ninja to engage in industrial espionage, to steal the secrets of a rival's superior sword-making technique, or their more efficient method for mining silver. They could also be used to disrupt a rival's economy by burning their markets or spreading rumors that would cause a panic and devalue their rice stores. In this sense, the ninja were instruments of economic warfare, demonstrating that battles are not only fought on the field, but also in the marketplace. The concept of a ninja scroll containing secret techniques is a classic trope. While manuals like the Bansen Shukai did exist, they were more like encyclopedias than step-by-step guides. A scroll could not teach you how to move silently or how to endure pain. This knowledge was embodied, learned through practice. The scrolls were valuable as a record of philosophy and a collection of techniques, but they were no substitute for a lifetime of rigorous, hands-on training under a master. The true secrets of ninjutsu were not written on paper. They were written into the muscles and minds of its practitioners. Let's look at the simple rice ball, or onigiri. This was the perfect food for a ninja on a mission. It was lightweight, portable, and packed with energy. It could be filled with preserved ingredients like pickled plums, umeboshi, which also had antibacterial properties, helping to keep the rice from spoiling. A ninja could carry several days' worth of sustenance in a small pouch. This logistical simplicity was key to their ability to travel long distances and operate independently without a supply train. Even their food was optimized for stealth, efficiency, and self-reliance. The psychological toll of being a ninja must have been immense. They lived a life of constant deception, even among their own communities. They had to be perpetually vigilant, aware that a single mistake could lead to a gruesome death. They were tasked with committing acts that would weigh heavily on the conscience of an ordinary person. The mental discipline and emotional detachment required to function in this role were extraordinary. They were masters of compartmentalization, able to separate their mission from their personal identity. But the strain of living this double life must have been profound. The story of the ninja is, in many ways, the story of the underdog. They were typically from lower social classes, using unconventional tactics to fight a more powerful and socially superior enemy. This is a universally appealing narrative. We are naturally drawn to stories of the small and clever triumphing over the large and powerful. The ninja embodies this archetype. They are a symbol of the power of ingenuity over brute force, of intelligence over inherited privilege. This is a core reason why their legend resonates so deeply, even when it is divorced from historical fact. The ninja's understanding of darkness was scientific. They knew that after moving from a bright area to a dark one, it takes time for the human eye to adjust. They would use this to their advantage, luring an enemy out of a well-lit room into a dark courtyard, where the ninja, already adapted to the darkness, would have a significant tactical advantage. They also knew that the periphery of the eye is more sensitive to movement in low light, so they would watch their enemies, silhouettes from the corner of their eye. They were practical students of human optics. The kusarigama, a sickle attached to a long chain with a weight at the end, is one of the few genuinely exotic ninja weapons with historical basis. It was an incredibly complex weapon to master. The chain could be used to entangle an opponent's sword or limbs from a distance. The weight could be used as a bludgeon, and the sickle could be used for deadly close-range attacks. It was a weapon that required immense coordination and skill, perfectly embodying the ninja philosophy of using unexpected, multi-purpose tools to control the battlefield and overcome a more conventionally armed opponent. Let's consider the role of a ninja as a bodyguard. While they were known for assassination, their skills were equally valuable for protection. Tokugawa Ieyasu famously used Hattori Hanzo's men as his personal guards. A ninja bodyguard would be an expert in spotting potential threats, identifying assassins, and securing a location against infiltration. Their paranoid mindset, honed by years of being the infiltrator, made them uniquely qualified to think like an assassin and preemptively counter their moves. They could protect a lord because they knew exactly how they would try to kill him. The ninja's use of codes and ciphers, ango, was essential for secure communication. They used simple substitution ciphers, but also more complex methods. One famous technique was to use the characters from a well-known poem or religious text as a key. Messages could also be hidden in plain sight. A seemingly normal letter might contain a secret message in the first character of each line, or through the use of specific, pre-arranged alternative meanings for common words. This was the art of steganography, hiding a message so well that no one even knows it is there. The cultural context of honor is key to understanding the ninja. The samurai's concept of honor was tied to their name, their lineage, and their public reputation. To die gloriously in battle was the ultimate honor. The ninja's world was inverted. Their honor was in their anonymity. To successfully complete a mission, without anyone ever knowing they were there, was the ultimate achievement. They sought to erase their name from history, while the samurai sought to write it in bold letters. It was a completely different value system, born from a different social reality and a different approach to conflict. The ninja's knowledge of poisons was deeply tied to their knowledge of antidotes. They could not risk being accidentally poisoned themselves, and they needed to be able to treat their comrades. This meant they were skilled herbalists, able to identify and prepare remedies for a wide range of toxins. A ninja on a mission would likely carry a small kit of antidotes and medicinal herbs. This defensive knowledge was just as crucial as their offensive knowledge of poisons. It was another facet of their obsession with self-reliance and survival in any circumstance. The myth of the ninja being able to create duplicate bodies is based on a simple but effective battlefield tactic. A ninja team might all wear the same disguise. When confronted, they would scatter in different directions. The pursuing enemy would be confused, unsure of which one was the real target, dividing their forces and allowing most of the team, including the one with the critical information, to escape. To a panicked observer, it would seem as though the ninja had magically multiplied. It was a trick of perception and coordination, not supernatural power. The ninja's influence on martial arts is often overstated. While some modern arts claim a direct lineage, the fighting style of a historical ninja was not a style in the modern sense. It was a collection of dirty, pragmatic techniques designed to end a confrontation as quickly and brutally as possible. There were no rules, no forms, kata, for a tournament. It was about eye gouging, throat strikes, and attacking joints. It was the art of anti-martial arts, a rejection of the ritualized combat of the samurai in favor of pure, desperate effectiveness. The final image of the ninja shouldn't be of a warrior, but of a question mark. They represent the gaps in our historical knowledge, the things that happened in the shadows that were never written down. They force us to acknowledge that the official story is never the whole story. The ninja is a symbol of everything that is secret, covert, and unrecorded. Their true story is a powerful lesson in humility for historians, a reminder that the past is filled with ghosts whose actions we can only guess at, but whose impact may have been profound. So we end where we began, with the image of a figure in the dark. But now it is a different figure. It is not a magical assassin in black pajamas. It is a farmer, a spy, a survivor. It is a person whose greatest weapon was not a sword, but their mind, whose greatest skill was not fighting, but thinking. The real story of the ninja is not one of fantasy. It is a testament to the incredible resilience, ingenuity, and pragmatism of human beings pushed to the very edge. And it is in that gritty reality that their true and far more impressive legacy can be found. Let's explore the concept of gotanpo, the so-called 5 elements of escape. This was a classification of techniques using natural elements as cover. Daton, earth, involved using terrain, digging, and structures to hide. Sutan, water, was using rivers, moats, and rain. Kitan, fire, was using smoke and arson as a diversion. Mokutan, wood, was using trees and vegetation for camouflage. And kinton, metal, involved using reflective objects for signaling or distraction, and sometimes referred to using tools like caltrops. This wasn't magic, but a systematic way of thinking about and exploiting the environment to facilitate a successful escape. The ninja's understanding of human anatomy was not just for combat, but for disguise. By understanding the underlying muscle and bone structure of the face, they could use simple padding or shadowing with soot to subtly change their appearance. They knew how posture affected perception, how standing a certain way could make you seem taller, shorter, weaker, or stronger. This was a deep, practical knowledge of how the human body works and how it is perceived, allowing them to manipulate their own form to suit the needs of the mission. It was artistry, combined with a clinical understanding of physiology. The economic impact of a single successful ninja mission could be enormous. A mission that successfully burned an enemy's primary rice storehouse before winter could be more devastating than winning a major battle. It could lead to starvation, desertion, and the complete collapse of the enemy's ability to wage war. The daimyo who hired the ninja would have achieved a major strategic victory for a fraction of the cost of a full military campaign. This is why ninja skills were so valuable. They were a force multiplier, offering a high return on investment in a world where resources were scarce and conflict was constant. The role of children in espionage is a dark but historically documented aspect of this world. Children were often used as spies because they were naturally overlooked and underestimated. They could move through encampments and towns without raising suspicion, listening to conversations and acting as couriers. Mochizuki Chiyome's network of kunoichi reportedly recruited many young orphan girls. This is a grim reminder of the brutal, total war mentality of the era, where every possible asset, regardless of age or gender, could be weaponized in the struggle for power and survival. Let's consider the simple act of walking. A ninja practiced various specialized walking techniques. Nukiashi was the art of moving with a soft, stealthy tread, like a cat. Shinobi-iri was the broader art of stealthy entry. They would walk on the sides of their feet to minimize the surface area touching the ground. They would time their steps with gusts of wind or other ambient noises. This wasn't just walking quietly. It was a highly developed science of silent movement, practiced for thousands of hours until it became an unconscious, reflexive skill, allowing them to glide through a hostile environment like a phantom. The relationship between ninja and entertainment troupes is another interesting overlap. Traveling performers, like Sarugaku troops, had a legitimate reason to move freely between different domains. This provided a perfect cover for espionage. A ninja could join such a troupe, using their acrobatic and performance skills as part of their disguise. While entertaining a lord in his castle, they could be simultaneously mapping its layout and gathering intelligence. This blurred the line between entertainment and espionage, turning the arts into a vehicle for covert operations. The ninja's use of dogs deserves more attention. While guard dogs were an obstacle, ninja also used dogs themselves. They could be trained to carry messages or to act as silent lookouts, alerting their master to an approaching patrol with a low growl rather than a loud bark. They could also be used to create diversions, setting them loose in an enemy camp to cause chaos. A ninja's deep understanding of animal behavior allowed them to turn both wild and domesticated animals into unwitting allies in their missions. The concept of zanshin is important. It is a state of relaxed awareness, of being constantly mindful of one's surroundings without being tense or paranoid. A ninja had to cultivate zanshin at all times. Even when resting, a part of their mind had to remain on alert. This is an incredibly draining state to maintain, and it speaks to the immense mental fortitude required for this line of work. It is the art of being simultaneously at peace and at war. a state of perpetual, calm readiness for whatever might happen next. The historical debate over the very existence of the ninja is worth noting. Some skeptical historians have argued that the ninja as a distinct class of specialized spies was largely a creation of Edo period fiction. They argue that the skills of ninjutsu were simply a part of the standard toolkit for any samurai warrior. While the modern, romanticized version is certainly a myth, the overwhelming evidence from historical documents, military chronicles, and castle designs points to the existence of specialized, unconventional warfare experts, primarily from Iga and Koga, who were hired for their unique skills. The debate is over their exact nature and organization, not their existence entirely. The ninja's legacy can be seen as a form of rebellion against a rigid social structure. The samurai class was defined by birthright. If you were not born a samurai, you could never become one. The ninja offered an alternative path to power and influence, one based on skill, intelligence, and merit, not on lineage. In their own way, they were a disruptive force, challenging the established order by proving that a low-born person with the right skills could be more effective and more dangerous than a high-born warrior who relied solely on tradition and honor. Let's talk about the use of kites. While the idea of a ninja flying on a kite is absurd, they were used for signaling and reconnaissance. A kite could be flown high above a castle to get a better sense of its layout, a kind of primitive aerial photography. Different colored kites or kites with specific patterns could be used to send complex signals over long distances to a friendly army. It was another example of the ninja adapting a common object, in this case, a toy, for a sophisticated military purpose. The ninja's understanding of human psychology was their most powerful weapon. They knew that people fear what they cannot see and what they do not understand. They exploited this by cultivating an aura of mystery and supernatural power. They knew that people are creatures of habit, so they would observe a guard's routine until it became predictable and exploitable. They knew that greed, lust, and ambition could be used to turn an enemy's own officials into informants. They were not fighting soldiers, they were fighting human nature itself, and they were masters of its weaknesses. The sensory deprivation training ninja sometimes undertook was extreme. They would spend long periods in complete darkness and silence to hone their other senses. By depriving the brain of sight and sound, the senses of touch, smell, and even a sixth sense for air currents and vibrations become heightened. This training allowed them to navigate and fight effectively in pitch-black conditions where their enemies would be completely helpless. It was a way of recalibrating their entire sensory apparatus to become a perfect, low-light predator. The role of the ninja in spreading disinformation was crucial. They could be hired to spread rumors that a rival lord was a poor military commander, or that his heir was illegitimate, or that he was planning to betray his own allies. These rumors would erode the lord's authority and create discord within his ranks, weakening him from the inside, without a single drop of blood being shed. In a society where reputation and alliances were everything, this form of information warfare could be absolutely devastating. The humble bamboo stick was an incredibly versatile tool. It could be used as a breathing tube for underwater missions, as the casing for a fire-starting drill, as a blowgun for silent projectiles, or as a container for carrying water or secret messages. It was lightweight, strong, and readily available. The ninja's ability to see the manifold possibilities within such a simple, natural object is a perfect metaphor for their entire philosophy. Look at the ordinary and see the extraordinary potential. The ninja's knowledge of poisons was matched by their skill in avoiding being poisoned themselves. When infiltrating a castle, they would be extremely wary of the food and drink they were offered. They might carry a small piece of silver, which was believed to tarnish in the presence of certain poisons. They might have their own trusted source of water. This constant defensive mindset, this assumption that any offered kindness could be a trap, was essential for survival in a world of deception and betrayal. The image of the ninja running with their arms straight back is a modern invention, largely from anime. It has no basis in historical reality. A person running for speed and balance naturally pumps their arms. The ninja run is an artistic convention designed to look cool and unique on screen, but it is biomechanically inefficient. It's another example of how pop culture has created a visual language for the ninja that is completely detached from any practical reality. The ninja's end was a slow fade, not a sudden disappearance. As the Tokugawa shogunate consolidated its power and the era of peace continued, the ninja clans lost their primary source of income and their reason for being. Some integrated into the new government's police and intelligence services. Many more simply returned to farming. The skills were passed down for a few generations, but without the constant pressure of war to keep them sharp, they became more of a historical curiosity, a martial arts tradition rather than a practical profession. The world simply no longer needed them. The final, lasting impact of the ninja is on our idea of what is possible. They represent the human capacity to overcome impossible odds through intelligence and unconventional thinking. They are a symbol of the idea that the established rules can be broken, that the powerful can be challenged, and that the greatest strength is not always the most obvious one. They are a whisper in the ear of history that says, there is always another way. So the ninja of legend and the ninja of history are two sides of the same coin. The legend is the story we tell, full of magic and excitement. The history is the lesson we learn, one of pragmatism, desperation, and incredible ingenuity. To truly understand the ninja, we must appreciate both. We must enjoy the myth for the powerful fantasy it is, while respecting the far more complex and impressive truth of the historical figures who inspired it. The shadow is exciting, but the person who casts it is where the real story lies. Let's consider the concept of a safe house. A ninja clan operating in hostile territory would have a network of safe houses, an unassuming farmhouse, a room in a temple, a back room of a shop, where their operatives could rest, receive new orders, and store equipment. These locations were a vital part of their operational infrastructure. The people running these safe houses were often just as brave as the field operatives, risking their own lives to support the clan's missions. This logistical network was the invisible backbone that made their covert operations possible. The ninja's skill in what we would now call social engineering was paramount. This is the art of manipulating people into divulging confidential information. A ninja might strike up a conversation with a disgruntled guard, sympathizing with his complaints about low pay and long hours, slowly building a rapport until the guard lets slip a crucial detail about his patrol route or a weakness in the defenses. This was not about a dramatic interrogation. It was about the slow, patient cultivation of human assets through psychological manipulation. The ninja's clothing, the shinobifuku, while not black, was full of clever design features. It often had numerous hidden pockets for carrying small tools, poisons, or messages. The sash, or obi, could be much longer than normal, allowing it to be used as a rope or a binding. The sleeves could be tightened at the wrist to prevent snagging. It was a utilitarian garment, where every element was designed with a practical purpose in mind, turning their clothing into an extension of their toolkit. The role of gambling in the ninja's world is an interesting side note. Gambling dens were excellent places to gather information. People from all social classes mixed there, and alcohol often loosened tongues. A ninja could linger in such a place, disguised as just another gambler, and listen to the loose talk of soldiers and officials. They could also use gambling to get close to a target, perhaps by first losing money to them to gain their trust, before moving on to the real purpose of the mission. The development of a cover story was a critical part of mission planning. This was more than just a disguise. It was a complete, believable identity. A ninja posing as a merchant would need to know the names of his family, the details of his business, and have plausible reasons for being in a particular place at a particular time. The cover story had to be simple enough to be remembered easily under pressure, but detailed enough to withstand scrutiny. A weak cover story was a fatal flaw in any operation. The ninjas' study of castle architecture was so advanced that they sometimes worked as consultants. A lord building a new castle might hire a ninja from a friendly clan to inspect the plans and the construction site, pointing out potential vulnerabilities that an enemy ninja could exploit. They would act as white hat hackers, helping to design more secure fortresses. This demonstrates that their knowledge was respected and that their skills were seen as a legitimate, if specialized, form of engineering expertise. The ninjas' use of scent was a two-way street. They were not only good at detecting scents, but also at masking their own. They knew that the human body has a distinct smell that can be detected by animals or sharp-nosed guards. They would often wash with specific herbs or rub their clothes with pine needles or other strong-smelling foliage to mask their own scent and blend in with the natural smells of the environment. It was another layer of their comprehensive approach to camouflage. The legal status of the ninja was non-existent. They were not a recognized class like the samurai or the clergy. They were outlaws and mercenaries operating outside the bounds of the law. If captured, they had no rights. This gave them a great deal of freedom, as they were not bound by any legal or social codes, but it also put them in a position of extreme peril. They had no one to appeal to and no system to protect them. Their only protection was their own skill and the secrecy of their clan. The ninja's toolkit for arson included fire arrows, which were specially designed to continue burning after impact. They also had sophisticated incendiary devices with delayed fuses, allowing them to plant a device and be miles away before it ignited. This technological edge in pyrotechnics made them incredibly effective arsonists, able to inflict massive damage with a relatively low risk of being caught in the act. Fire was one of their most feared and most effective weapons of mass disruption. The myth of the ninja being able to make themselves invisible is likely based on their mastery of sakijutsu, the art of sensing, killing intent. Through intense training, a ninja could learn to detect the subtle signs of aggression in an opponent, a tensing of the muscles, a change in breathing, before an attack was launched. Conversely, they could learn to suppress their own killing intent, allowing them to approach an enemy without triggering that same primal alarm. To the target, it would seem as though the ninja had appeared from nowhere, as their senses had given them no warning of the impending danger. The ninja's role in gathering economic intelligence was vital. Before a military campaign, a lord needed to know if his rival had the economic resources to sustain a long war. A ninja would be dispatched to assess the state of the enemy's crops, the amount of rice in their storehouses, and the condition of their local markets. This information was just as important as knowing the number of soldiers. A war is fought with food and money as much as with swords and spears, and the ninja were the ones who provided this critical economic data. The ninja's ability to improvise was perhaps their most important skill. No plan ever survives contact with the enemy. A mission would inevitably go wrong in some way. A guard patrol would change its route. A locked door would be unexpectedly unlocked. A storm would arrive early. A ninja had to be able to adapt to these changing circumstances instantly, to think on their feet and come up with a new plan on the fly. This mental flexibility, this ability to thrive in chaos, was what separated the master ninja from the novice. The image of the ninja meditating under a waterfall is a classic trope, and it has a basis in reality. This practice, known as takiyo, was used by Yamabushi and some martial artists. The intense cold and the force of the water were a form of endurance training, a way to test and strengthen one's physical and mental resolve. It was a trial by nature, designed to forge an unbreakable will and a body that was impervious to hardship. For a ninja, it was another tool for honing themselves into the perfect instrument for their dangerous work. The modern-day fascination with the ninja speaks to a desire for a different kind of power. In a world often dominated by overt, brute force, the ninja represents the power of subtlety, intelligence, and quiet competence. They are a symbol that the biggest and loudest are not always the most effective. The ninja's power is the power of the overlooked, the underestimated, and the unseen. It is the power of the whisper that is more effective than the shout, a concept that holds a deep and enduring appeal. The legacy of the ninja in modern special forces is undeniable. The core principles of operating in small, highly trained teams, using stealth and surprise, engaging in reconnaissance and sabotage, and living by a creed of quiet professionalism are all hallmarks of elite military units around the world today. The tools have changed from climbing claws to grappling launchers, from blinding powder to flashbang grenades, but the fundamental philosophy of the unconventional warrior, pioneered by those shadowy figures in feudal Japan, remains remarkably relevant. The ninja's story is ultimately a human one. When we strip away the black suit, the magic tricks, and the movie myths, we are left with people. People who were born into a brutal world, and who used their creativity and courage to find a way to survive and prosper within it. They were not demons or magicians. They were farmers, survivors, and supremely skilled professionals. Their story is a powerful testament to the human ability to adapt, to innovate, and to turn weakness into strength. And so, we must let go of the simple, comfortable myth. The reality is far more compelling. The real ninja was not a comic book character. They were a product of their time and place, a shadowy reflection of the turmoil and ingenuity of feudal Japan. Their tactics were not honorable, but they were effective. Their lives were not glamorous, but they were impactful. They were the masters of the unseen, the quiet architects of chaos, and the ultimate pragmatists in a world that had little room for them. The truth is that the most successful ninja in history is a person whose name we will never know. They completed every mission without being detected. They gathered their intelligence, performed their sabotage, and returned home without leaving a single trace. Their anonymity is the ultimate proof of their mastery. They exist only as a blank space in the historical record, a silent testament to the fact that the most profound influence is often completely invisible. The ninja we think we know, the pop culture icon, is a ghost, a legend born from the theater and nurtured by fiction. He is an entertaining and powerful phantom. But the real ninja, the historical operative, was something far more tangible and, in the end, far more impressive. They were the living embodiment of the idea that knowledge is power, that the best-laid plans of lords and generals can be undone by a single, well-informed person in the right place at the right time. So when you think of the ninja, don't just picture the silhouette on the roof. Picture the patient servant listening in the kitchen. Picture the resourceful farmer adapting his tools for a new purpose. Picture the meticulous spy who changed the course of a war with a whispered secret. The ninja wasn't who you think they were. They were the quiet, brilliant, and desperate individuals who mastered the art of not being seen, and in doing so, they ensured their legend would be seen forever.